Dun, 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 dun,
All
dun,
right.
dun, dun.
So, all right, I hit live. I'm going to go over real quick and make sure we come through on Rumble, which usually takes a couple of minutes.
Okay.
So,
And we're on Twitter. We're on Twitter. And did we lose Bridget?
I'm here. I'm here. I'm here.
Okay, so welcome everybody. We're going to talk about. Okay, guys.
She got the giggles. She started it.
I can't help it.
I'm just saying, she started it.
No, it's definitely your fault there.
Oh, I've lost control already. Okay.
Sorry, Mom.
I can't take them anywhere. All right.
Nope, sure can.
So, we're going to talk tonight about Ukraine 2014. There were quite a few things that were happening in Ukraine in 2014, and people tend to focus on one or the other and not all of them. So we're going to try to stream them all together and make a few observations along the way. So we're going to start in, I want to share my screen and I'm going to try to do this.
I can't wait to watch this. Okay.
Yeah, I'm so not good at this. All right, so let's see. There we go. Okay, so
go girl.
It's blank.
Nice job.
I'm going to say that's not it.
It's gonna happen, you know it.
All right, let's try this again. I'm going to have to do it on my Safari.
Okay, no.
Let's entire screen. I have it over here on my Safari, so let me put that up right here.
Is this on Twitter?
So,
is this on Twitter too?
Yes.
Do they know how crazy we are?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
yes.
Shit.
Yes. All right. So here is the report that was written about Euromaidan coup. And you see how it says anti-constitutional coup? Nowhere does it say color revolution. So can y'all see this on the screen okay?
Yeah.
I mean, not reading it, but can you see the pictures?
Yes.
Okay.
They're very pretty.
So, all right. So you see right there is Victoria Nuland, and right over here we have John McCain, right? So notice what it says here: chairman of the board of directors of International Republican Institute at Euromaidan. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so right here, European and Eurasian affairs at Euromaidan. Okay. So Ukrainian Euromaidan was characterized by mass riots organized with the support and participation of Western countries. And again, this is actually from a report here, International Public Tribunal for Crimes of Ukrainian Neo-Nazis and Their Accomplices, right? The Foundation for the Study of Democracy. So basically what it's saying is that there was a coup in Kiev that basically removed the legitimately elected president of Ukraine and basically set up an unconstitutional regime that had Nazi elements brought to power, unleashing an internal civil war. Now, it's not like those of you who follow Operation Gladio has seen that ever anywhere in the world, except for everywhere all the time, right? So we have not only demonstrated to you through Operation Condor this concept where the State Department, CIA goes in and coups a government, and then commences with a civil war that basically tears the country apart. And they're doing it in order to be able to control the resources that are inside of that country. Now, there's not a lot of resources outside of the Donbass region in Ukraine. It's a big farm other than the Donbass region, which is where their rare earth minerals and things of that nature are located. So what they're hoping in 2014 is they can take the country and keep the Donbass as well. That really didn't work out very well.
The biolabs are
Go ahead.
also located out.
But they're all over the country. I don't have a map of that, but there was a concentration of them there, but they're also in the Kharkiv area and several other areas as well. But anyway, the primarily ethnic Russian Ukrainians all live in the Donbass region as well. So all of that's important for this entire conversation. So in the immediate, let's go through the coup. I want to say a couple of things about this. So basically, it talks about 21 February 2014, under direct pressure and guarantees from Western countries, the duly elected, you know, all about democracy, Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych and the political leadership of the Euromaidan, represented by the leader of the Fatherland Party and the leader of the UDAR Party, and the leader of the pro-Nazi Savada Party, signed an agreement on the settlement of the political crisis in Ukraine. The foreign ministers of Germany, Poland, France, all were guarantors of its implementation. I don't know what the hell that means because they didn't guarantee anything. Among other things, the opposition pledged to normalize life in the towns and villages by vacating administrative and public buildings and unblocking streets and squares, handing over illegal weapons to the Ukrainian Interior Minister, and the opposition and state authorities moving away from the confrontation positions. After signing the agreement, the president gave instructions to withdraw law enforcement from the center of Kiev. Thereafter, in violation of the agreement signed by the guarantees of Western countries, on the next day, 2014, Euromaidan militants seized government buildings in violation of the Ukrainian constitution, and with insufficient number of votes, the Verkhovna Rada, which had fallen under Euromaidan's control, removed the country's legitimate president. So that's an unconstitutional move. And they basically did exactly what they did in Iran, where the Shah basically deposes the prime minister, and not the parliament, back when they overthrew Iran. And this is the same move that we've seen them try and successfully pull off in several other, they did it to Lumumba. They got the president to basically fire the prime minister, which constitutionally in the Congo, he didn't have the authority to do, but they did it. And then, of course, everybody immediately jumps in and recognizes this unconstitutional act. And keep in mind, this is after they've already overthrew the Ukrainian government back in 2004, right? They already, with the unconstitutional third election, when it's only a 2 election, have to get over 50% in the first one. If they don't do that, then you have a runoff election, ranked choice voting. Anybody recognize that? And both of those were won by the same guy, this guy right here, Yanukovych. And They go to a third runoff, which is completely unconstitutional because these same forces got in together and basically started rioting, just like they did here. No rooftop snipers in 2004, but they got what they wanted. They got the third election. If they hadn't have gotten what they wanted in the third election, which went the other way, and then the guy basically got robbed again. So that's a coup. There would have been violence in 2004 had he not stepped away, because they don't stop until they get what they want. So basically it says, go ahead. Did you want to say something? Liza?
We're back.
What happened?
I got through backstage, and then right when she was getting ready to tell you that I got through backstage, she flipped off. So.
Okay.
Go
Oh,
ahead,
this is
sorry.
going to be one of those shows. All right. So, well, Liza was having problems, and hopefully she can get back in here. If not, she's going to call me and we're going to have her on the speakerphone. So anyway, let me go ahead and finish this part.
She's backstage, she said.
I don't see her.
Okay.
Hold on. Oh, there she is. All right. There we go. All right. She's back in.
Yeah.
All right. So, guys, messing with your computers. All right.
I'm not messing
So-
with anything. All right. It's the Verizon Nazis. Okay. I'm just going to make that perfectly clear.
Well, we've
Okay,
got
it might have been
Nazis
fat.
everywhere.
Yeah.
It might have been
That's
fat fingers too, but I ain't saying.
Okay. So the bottom line is, before I was rudely interrupted,
Sorry.
we've got the French, the Germany, and Poland all telling this president, you know, hey, just get out of the square. Everything's going to be fine. And as soon as he does that, then these, and keep in mind, from Operation Gladio perspective, these are all NATO people. And we understand that NATO orchestrates these coups. And you've got, so just for anybody that's new, that's watching this for the first time, I'm just going to say this really quickly. Operation Gladio ran out of NATO, orchestrates coups and takes over governments for NATO. And they do it in order to secure resources. And there's lots of other reasons that you can go look on our Rumble page and find video after video after video that tells you all about that. But the important part of this is all of these people that are guaranteeing the peace here, the guarantors, means absolutely nothing, because they've done this repeatedly all over the world over 80 times as far as cooing governments. So the very next day, they all renege on their promise, and they knew this was happening because there's a plan to do this. This didn't just happen. This isn't just organic. So basically, as soon as the RADA actions happen, all of these people rush in to recognize the fact that this has been, you know, the government's been overthrown. And I want to show some of the pictures, because here's the people that were complicit. Jeffrey Pyatt, the Secretary General of the Council of Europe, Jagland, Simon Smith, the British ambassador, Christopher Whale, the German ambassador to Ukraine. And you can just see Polish foreign minister, the European Union ambassador to Ukraine, European Commissioner for Enlargement. Yeah, enlargement. Okay, that means they want Ukraine in the EU. Council of Europe representative in Ukraine, And then here's the pictures I wanted you to see. And I'm going to read this to you. In the spirit of Nazi nationalist hovered over the entire Euromaidan, images of the agent of Hitler's special services, Stepan Bandera, were everywhere. Posters with his image were hung on the building, seized by the Euromaidan militants, and raised at the demonstration and torchlight marches. Almost all of the Euromaidan organizers did not hide their admiration for Stepan Bandera. For example, one of its leaders, the head of the pro-Nazi Savada Party, Taya Gayobach, directly declared even before 2014 that Bandera's cause is winning. Our task is to bring Bandera's cause to the final victory. It was this party that organized the annual torchlight processions in his honor. Yulia Tymoshenko, whose party was actively involved in organizing the Euromaidan, said explicitly that children should be brought up on the example of Stepan Bandera. She also proposed the creation of a pantheon of Ukrainian national heroes where Stepan Bandera would occupy first place. The future leader of the Euromaidan militants, Andrei Parabi, was one of the main initiators of erecting monuments to Stepan Bandera. So I want you to look here. You can see like this area right here, the emblem,
Nope.
which is Azov Battalion. And you have the this over here, you have the German Panzer SS division emblems. And so you have all of this Nazi paraphernalia all over the Ukrainian 2014 coup. And that's very, very important. Most of these people at the time were on watch list for terrorists, and they were involved in the overthrow of the Ukrainian government that was, you know, democracy. All of these fake people that are in our Congress in the United States are screaming about saving democracies when they're overthrowing democracies all over the world. So just wanted to put all of that in context. So this happens in, I'm going to get back over here so I can stop sharing my screen. This all happens in 2014 in February. So we completely destabilized the country. Then,
And excuse me real quick, for anybody that's looking for further information, Oliver Stone actually did a fantastic documentary called Ukraine on Fire, and so far it is still on YouTube, and it does interview Poroshenko and people that were there during the coup. So it's very informative if anybody would like to actually see what the colonel is talking about.
So basically, as soon as this coup happens, all hell breaks loose because, of course, Russia realizes that they can't lose Crimea. So they basically take Crimea. And the people that are behind this want control over the Donbass region. Unfortunately for the people that were in control of the overthrow, the coup, all of the Donbass region, which is ethnically Russian, but Ukrainian citizens nonetheless, the mayors, the governors of those regions, all have and vote for presidents that will maintain the relationship with Ukraine and Russia because they live right in the middle of it. And they voted for a president that would do just that, that the West, i.e. NATO, overthrew. So they're not going to like who NATO installs, right? Because they're not going to have their best interests at heart because they're sitting on a gold mine of resources. So immediately, all of the Gladio stay behind capability is going to get to work because they have a plan to basically get rid of the leadership here and take the Donbass region over. And they're going to do it by force. So as soon as they come piling in from the West, Russia brings reinforcements and capability in from the East for them to be able to protect themselves. Now, what you have to understand is go back knowing what I just told you and read the New York Times article that came out 2 weeks before the attack on the Crocus, talking about the CIA stay behind units buried along the border of the Donbass region. What they called it was the Ukraine-Russia border, but it's the new border. It's not the old one, because the old one would be in the Donbass region. They didn't put them there. And I want you to think about this critically. So in 2014, that entire territory was still Ukrainian. But yet the CIA set up over 20 stay-behind secret, covert cells that they're going to operate out of and give intel capability to, buried in the ground, along the western part of the Donbass region. So the article in the New York Times says it was put on the Ukrainian border and it started in 2014. That's a lie, because the Ukrainian border is in the Donbass region with Russia. So they knew where they were setting up their militant line. Is that clear? Am I making sense? Here's the entire Ukraine, here's the Donbass region, and here's Russia. They set up the line right here, not here with Russia. And if you don't know the history, you're not going to understand that. So they were actually attacking the Donbass region before attacking Russia. And they assassinated multiple numbers. I mean, like over 10 mayors starting in 2014. They're assassinating political figures all through the Donbass region. They're bombing schools. They're bombing anything and everything that's going to give them that fear factor and create chaos. And they, meaning the Ukraine, Svoboda, Azov. One last thing. Igor Kolomoisky was appointed governor by the new guy that comes in after their coup. The area that he was appointed governor is on the border with the Donbass region, not Russia, the Donbass region. He immediately sends out a call to the Azov battalion and hires them to provide security. So now we have the Nazis and the CIA on the border of the Donbass region, and all hell breaks loose. So you basically have an Operations Gladio kind of capability going on all along, and they're launching it into the Donbass region because they want their resources for the international syndicate. And Russia is not playing. So they start providing backups. And this is not anything like they tell you on the news as to what happened. They make it all seem like it was all instigated by Russia. And that's just a bold-faced lie. Russia was watching ethnic Russian people being murdered in the streets and decided to help. So you need to understand all of that. Now, let me move on to, that's the spring of 2014. I don't know if you guys ever heard of Bellingcat, but Bellingcat was an organization. And if you go to their website, they talk about how, you know, there's the benevolent fact checkers and how they're there to make sure that everybody's held accountable and telling the truth. Well, unfortunately, that's not actually what they are. Bellingcat was set up on, let me get my screen back over here. the 15th of July, 2014, in the Netherlands. And they claim to be an open source fact checker.
Excuse me.
And
everybody needs to remember the date, July 15th, 2014.
Okay, so Elliot Higgins is the guy that sets it up. And I would recommend checking him out, because Elliot Higgins, let me pull him up real quick. Elliot Higgins, it says here, is he has a interesting habit of showing up everywhere there's Operation Gladio crap going on against or setting Russia up. So he shows up in the Syrian civil war. He shows up in Ukraine throughout 2014 and 15. He shows up in the wreckage of the MH17, which we're going to talk about tonight. And he shows up when the NATO people accuse Russia of poisoning a couple that were basically accused of being a double agent. So
and in 2016 to 2019, Higgins was a senior fellow at the Atlantic Council.
Another strike against him.
Right.
And he, in 2012, he shows up as an administrator of a nonprofit for asylum seekers, you know, illegal aliens. And weirdly enough, he showed up at a company that manufactured lingerie. I don't know what the connection is there, and I don't want to know. He also says,
sounds like Wexner.
Yeah. So it says in November 2013, Elliot Higgins, quote unquote, confirmed that Syria had used chemical weapons without noticing that it was not the Syrian government that carried out the attacks. So then it gets down here to October 2018 at a press conference. He was basically confronted with his NATO ties, his CIA ties, and the fact that George Soros funds Bellingcat. So that's very interesting. And that's going to come back, because if you go back and you look at a lot of the reporting that happened with the MH17, Bellingcat was used as a source for a lot of it. And the fact that it was set up 2 days before MH17, just keep that in mind. One last guy that we want to look at to set the tone, and then Bridget and Cousin It's going to take it away as far as the actual events of the downing of MH17. But we want to talk just a second about Igor Girkin, Girkin. He basically says he's a Russian, and he admitted responsibility for sparking the Donbass war in eastern Ukraine, and that he had led a group of Russian militants that seized one of the cities. And that, so basically he's implicating Russia by taking responsibility, which is a great thing for him to do. However, if you go back and you look at Igor Girkin's background, he mysteriously shows up every time there's an Operation Gladio event going on against Russia, oddly enough. And let me get back here, because I just want to mention a couple of them that we have researched. And okay, right here he is. All right. So he shows up in the, let's see, where did it go? He shows up in the MH17 story. He shows up in the, shoot, hold on a second. Where's the list? Oh, here it is. He shows up in the Transnistria separatist movement in Moldova. He shows up in the Bosnia-Herzegovina conflict. And basically, both of those are Gladio operations. And oddly enough, which I've already talked about, the Chechnya was an Operation Gladio. He's there too. And I just want to say that if you're in the military, there's no way that you show up, or even just a random, patriot going, you don't show up at every single time there's a military conflict. That is a staged Operation Gladio event by coincidence. So I just wanted to bring him to everybody's attention because he's now in jail for basically being found out inside of Russia as not being a good guy. Okay, so with that, y'all take it away.
Okay, I'm just going to run through a really short, quick timeline to put it in perspective before Cousin It begins to lay some hard, incredulous facts. On July 17, 2014, for those of you who are not familiar with MH17, it is for Malaysia Flight 17, also called MH17, departed from Amsterdam Airport Schiphol at noon with a crew of 15 and 283 passengers for a regularly scheduled 11.5-hour flight. This was a continuous thing. This was not anything random. This was a daily flight. Now, over the area that they were going across, 4 planes had been through earlier that day. They were going to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. The aircraft was a Boeing wide-body 777-200, registration number 9MRMRD. At 4:15, so 4 hours into the flight, approximately, Malaysia Airlines confirms that it received notification from the Ukrainian Air Traffic Control that it had lost contact with MH17 at 30 kilometers from Tamak Waypoint, approximately 50 kilometers from the Russian-Ukrainian border on the Ukrainian side. At 5:30, Malaysia Airlines released an official tweet that Malaysia Airlines has lost contact with MH17 from Amsterdam and that the last position was over Ukrainian airspace. More details to follow. At 5:40 p.m., Moscow-based news agency Interfax said Malaysian passenger airliner was shot down at an altitude of 10 km, which is about 30,000 feet above eastern Ukraine. The Ukrainian Interior Ministry also confirmed that all passengers and crew were dead. The aircraft was shot down while at a cruising altitude of 30,000 feet. At 6 a.m., the next few kind of popped quickly. Ukrainian Prime Minister orders an investigation into the crash. Malaysian Prime Minister tweets, "I am shocked by the reports that the plane had crashed. We're launching an immediate investigation." Ukrainian officials at the location of the crash confirmed at least 100 bodies were found on the location and that body parts were scattered up to 15 kilometers from the site. By 6:30, both Ukrainian authorities, rebel leaders, deny shooting down MH17. An air-to-ground missile was suspected, this is what all the news was reporting, to have been brought down the aircraft. Russian President Vladimir Putin is in contact with the United States President Barack Obama on the crash, according to RIA News Agency. By 8:30, Interfax reports that pro-Russian separatists were to claim to have found the black box, and by 10:15, the aircraft's flight route was declared safe by the International Civil Aviation Organization and the International Air Transport Association, stated that the airspace the aircraft was traversing was not subject to restrictions. And let's see, MAS confirmed no distress call was made by MH17. Now, even though that may be what they claim, and within hours, senior Obama administration officials immediately said Russia was to blame, don't look any further, and they started to launch a psychological and full lockdown on all news recordings, just like they did with Bellingcat, to make sure that that is the only words everyone sees. Prior to this, the struggle in that area was very livid and very real. But the people in Kiev were the ones that they were essentially, Russia was attempting to woo them because it would be easier to protect Donbass and the other area if they just had the entire country in like a true democracy. The CIA and the bad guys, the deep state, the international syndicate, is wrestling for control of Kiev. Now all of a sudden they had a complete lockdown, and they had an incident that they could point to Russia as the bad guy and point and say, see, everybody agrees. There's nothing to see here, but Russia is a bad guy, and Russia doesn't care about you. Now, luckily, it just so happened that there was a man, Liza began following and starting telling me about, which is...
Okay. You're talking about Vasily?
Yes, Vasily, can you say his last name?
Pazarov or something.
Prazarov?
Yeah.
He was a former lieutenant colonel from Ukraine's security service until 2018, when he defected to Russia. In a 2019 press conference in Moscow, he said he had been collaborating with Russia for ideological reasons, passing information relating to Ukraine's anti-terrorist operations in the Donbass region following the 2014 partial annexation by Moscow. Now, there have been several attempts on Vasily's life since defecting. One of the most notable ones was reported on Telegram, where his Land Cruiser was blown up while he attempted to start the vehicle, and it landed him in hospital, leaving him with wounds on his arms and leg, requiring him to be hospitalized.
Right. That was this past April. So, and he's on
So
the Ukrainian hit list as well.
Wait a minute. So if
What?
he's just a internet sensation and putting out disinformation, why would you kill him?
Right. And this is not the first time they tried to kill him.
Yeah, they've
I
tried to kill
know.
him a couple times. Right.
Sounds like he might actually have something worth talking about if they're trying to kill him, but maybe that's just me. Go ahead.
And if
Yeah,
I'm right,
yeah, it could
I
be.
think I am. He brought documents with him, didn't he, Liza? Cousin Ed?
I believe he did. He doesn't talk about them much. He does imply that. But before we go any further, I do want to give a hat tip to the UKR leaks and Vasily Prozorov and his person that does the English translations for his documentaries, and they have been very kind in providing not only information for our research, but also on the Liberty as well, because Russia was involved with the Liberty as well. So.
Oh.
Go ahead, Bridget.
Okay, sorry. In his initial press conference after defecting to Russia in 2019, Vasily, related that he was a witness to visits by foreign advisors, including NGOs like the RAND Corporation. A 2019 report from the German version of RT summarizes his view on the Civil War that you were mentioning. A bunch of scoundrels seized power in February, he says. They were not afraid to unleash a war against their own population for the sake of maintaining power and for their own enrichment. Brezov says, recounting in detail the unlawful document that the military leadership used to grant itself authority to take action against it says insurgents, but they're not insurgents. These are your patriots. These are your nationalists. These are the people that are just, they're not
hold on,
starting
let me
any
help you with
trouble.
that.
They're just, yeah.
Hold on, let me help you with that. An insurgent is somebody that comes into an area and basically tries to create a takeover. These people live in the Donbass region. They are not insurgents. Go ahead.
Right. Yes, these are people who have lived there and their families have lived there for generations until we came along and NATO came along and began drawing imaginary borders. Anyway, essentially take action against these individuals in April in 2014 is just a few months before the MH17. They occupied several administrative buildings and surrounded them with improvised barricades. This is talking about the Nazis in Kiev. In the same manner as they had done a few months earlier in Western Ukraine when Yanukovych had been president. Shortly before, they proclaimed, the paper states, the People's Republic of Donetsk and Lugansk, but the Maidan-era occupiers who looted the entire arms depots are exempt from any prosecution. Boy, doesn't that sound like those Antifa? The occupiers from eastern Ukraine. Oh, go ahead.
So you're talking about Operation Gladio operators who took weaponry out of their caches.
Right.
And are using it against their own domestic citizens that live in the Donbass region. Okay, keep going.
They literally went into the equivalent of our Capitol building, stationed, I think it was 58 armed Nazis around the building and began rewriting the laws. That's the short version. Eastern Ukrainians reacted to the threat of the abolition of the law language, the last hurdle before they forced Ukrainianization, is what they called it, but essentially ethnic cleansing. In the arbitrariness and the hustle and bustle of the nationalists in the streets, they demanded autonomy for succession. At the time, only a few weeks earlier, the Crimean referendum had taken place, after which the Autonomous Republic of Crimea had joined the Russian Federation. But in eastern Ukraine, unlike Crimea, not a single Russian soldier was stationed. The rebels were on their own. The patriots were on their own. The new rulers decided to use the army and heavy weapons against its own people.
How Operation Gladio was shoved them.
I mean, straight out of the handbook, right?
Correct.
Now, regarding the MH17, because in it, there was something that took place in the tower right before.
Okay. Right. So I'm more of a bullet point person.
Yeah, go for it.
So I'm going to back up just a little bit too, because at this same time, Israel is also creating crap once again in Gaza and murdering Palestinians. So let's throw that out there, that the 2014 war yet again in Israel. And the reason why we know this.
This would have
Yeah,
took all
this
the
would have
headlines away from all that Gaza.
exactly. So we've got kind of a threefer with MH17 as far as the Gladio operation goes. We're distracting from the Gaza war, which Israel is once again doing ethnic cleansing. We're also distracting from the fact that we took over the Maidan coup just earlier that year. And we're also distracting with all the children on board, because there were 80 children on board that flight. We're distracting from the fact that in addition to those 80 children, there also happened to be Dr. Yohap Lang, who was the leading AIDS researcher. They were
Oh,
actually going to the International AIDS Conference that was located in Australia. And I'm sure at this point everybody's well aware that AIDS was, in fact, a bioweapon that was created at Fort Detrick. And Fauci, working for the DoD and his AZT bioweapon, specifically set up to murder anybody with AIDS, HIV. And the spread of the disease was actually through the Hep B vaccine, and that was going through Africa at the time. So Dr. Yohap Lang would have known all of that, and he would have had the wherewithal and the knowledge to trace it back to Fort Detrick. I'm not saying that anybody has actually proven that, but if anybody could have proven that Fauci, the DoD, and Fort Detrick did it, that was the guy.
now they
So,
didn't they say
ev-
that the cure to AIDS essentially died with this man? He was like
yes,
brilliant. I mean,
ma'am.
he was
Yes,
he was
yes.
not just any
He
ordinary researcher.
exactly. So anyway, on the day that the plane was shot down, and at this point we all know it was shot down. Sky News, was out of Australia, was actually in Gaza, and had indicated that they were at the crash scene within 24 hours. And the reason why they were able to be within 24 hours is because apparently there are consistent flights, daily flights, multiple daily flights from Gaza, or excuse me, from Tel Aviv to Ukraine. So they were actually the only news station that was on the ground at the time of the crash within 24 hours. Keeping
This
that in
is crazy.
mind, anything that people say about security is just flat out bullshit. There was no security. These guys were standing amongst the wreckage. They found the nose of the plane, and they were taking photos of that. And the conversation was that, well, that's a great photo. And the photographer said, we can't use it. And the reason why they couldn't use it is because the pilot's hands were still on the controls in the photos. So there was no security. There was also a report that 38 bodies disappeared immediately from the scene. And nobody knows really what happened to those bodies. They just simply disappeared. They were packed up in a refrigerator truck. They went off to the morgue, and then they disappeared. These are not to be confused with the bodies that were all making headlines, that were lined up on the side of the road photos, the opportunistic photos. Not to be confused with those. Those bodies were
I,
removed immediately, those 38 bodies.
and we
And, you know,
corroborated that on multiple different sources. I mean, because even on Getty Images, I saw. I mean, I can't even tell you how many people were wandering around, and it was local people. It wasn't
right,
even like
right.
anybody official.
So now, according to the story, um, which has been corroborated through Ukrainian news channels, there were three individuals that actually were at that airfield, and this is according to Vasily's paperwork, which is in Ukrainian, and written in a hurry, that the SBU had given permission to a Colonel Joseph Hickox, a Lieutenant Colonel Michael Willis, and a Major Patrick Self, which we'll get to in a minute. So those three individuals were actually given permission to be at the airfield that would have been the air traffic control that would have handled MH17 because it was flying over that area. Now, the day of the crash,
Liza,
the woman that was actually, yeah.
Where are they
Yep.
from? What military are they from?
Oh, I'm sorry. They're from our military. They're from our military. They're Air Force.
Our military?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
go ahead.
anyway, the long and the short of it is apparently that was the only working tower, conveniently, because there had been another tower in Ukraine somewhere along that stretch that was conveniently put out of operation. So it would have had to have communicated with that tower at that airfield at that time. So keeping that in mind, apparently that day there was an air traffic control woman, and she's actually disappeared. Nobody has seen her. Now, according to the flight records, MH17 had been flying at 35,000 feet. That air traffic control tower had instructed MH17 to drop down to 33,000 feet, which would have put it in range of the Ukrainian fighter jets, which also happened to be stationed at that airfield. There were at least 3 jets that were at that airfield that day. Now, at that time, according to witness reports, and of course, none of these witnesses were allowed to speak at the international courts because Russia was not allowed to bring any evidence in defense of their case, if you will. Excuse me. The villagers actually reported seeing these fighter jets going up, contacting MH17, and then MH17 exploding. Russia even has it on satellite imagery that these fighter jets were in contact with MH17. And of course, immediately, no, well, John Kerry covered it within a couple of days or so, because Russia's like, look, we have this. It wasn't us. It was this plane. It was one of their fighters that took it down. And, you know, John Kerry is setting, what was it, Meet the Nation or something, saying, you know, oh, well, that's just Russian disinformation and they doctored the film. And it wasn't doctored because the people on the ground actually said that they saw these jets leave that airfield. To make matters worse, one of the witnesses, so he's on Facebook and he's posting all over the place that he saw these jets, he saw that plane crash, and he's now contacted by this miscellaneous anonymous person who's representing himself as a reporter, and giving the sublime threats that he didn't really see what he thought he saw. And then finally the kid got back to him and said, I have no idea what you're talking about, to which the anonymous account replied, good answer. Well, it turns out that that person was actually from Bellingcat, and Bellingcat had contacted him and immediately turned around in all of their stories and called him like a conspiracy theorist, called him a lunatic, called him some nut job with mental issues. And he turns around, and it's actually still in process. That kid turned around and is in the process of suing Bellingcat for defamation. Just throwing it out there. So let's see, what else have we got? So Malaysia. So Malaysia shows up to the crash site.
Can I stop you just 1 second there? You said that Sky News? Yeah. You said that Sky News was the first on the scene. Do you know who owns Sky News?
Correct. I'm not aware of who's on.
Rupert Murdoch.
Oh my God.
Oh.
The same
talking bird
well, media.
Okay. Yeah.
All right, keep going.
So that's fine. Well, Rupert Murdoch owns all of them.
I just want to throw that in there.
Yeah. I think that's actually pretty funny. But their reasoning for being there first was because, again, they have multiple flights from Tel Aviv to Ukraine. and nobody else could get flights into Ukraine because at that point it is a war zone. Um,
Why are there
so
so
now
many?
Malaysia gets to.
But Israel can get into the war zone. Israel can get into the
Yes,
war zone.
Israel
Nobody
can
else.
get into the war zone.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right.
Nobody
That's
else.
odd.
And that's how the guys in Gaza were, or Tel Aviv were able to get there within
Exactly.
24 hours. At least that's the story that they tell. So anyway, Malaysia shows up. So while Sky News is there, and this is actually in one of the documentaries that they have, they reported that all the locals had shown up. And this is how unsecure the whole place was. So again, any reports of security was abject bullshit. They had the local miners show up. They had the villagers show up, and they were all carrying sticks with white fabric. And every time, and they were, line scouring the fields, and every time they'd find a body part, they'd stick the stick with the flag in the
But I
field,
thought that was
because of
supposed
course,
to be like danger zone, that there were supposed to be rebels fighting still there.
according to the Sky News report, they did hear gunfire, and they did hear a war off in the distance. But it's funny because one of the
Huh.
things that he says is, well, I know you can't hear it, but there is like shooting going on. Okay.
Huh.
So wait a minute. Wait a minute.
Uh-huh.
And you have not covered this at this point. MH17 was taken down over the Donbass region where there's an active war zone. And so
Yep.
as the flight is flying over an active war zone, a air traffic control station who has taken out the other competing air traffic control station that may have gotten the aircraft had it been left alone, it's taken down. So there's only one air traffic control that can be passed to over an active war zone. So my first question is, why the hell is aircraft flying over an active war zone? That's number one.
Well,
number two, hold on.
Yeah.
Number two, now that they are flying over an active war zone, which is normally a no-fly zone as far as civilian aircraft goes, it is actually told to get closer to the war zone by telling it to go from 35,000 down to 33,000.
Well, that's exactly the point, right? So they never closed the airspace over Ukraine during the whole time, because the commercial jets were actually flying at a level where the Buk missile that everybody was making this big to-do about, the bullshit about the missile. So that missile never could have reached at 33,000 feet or at 35,000 feet. That missile wasn't capable of doing it.
Right, but I'm still stuck on the air traffic control that we know has 3 U.S. Air Force officers co-located with, telling a commercial airline to come down in altitude over an active
so the
war
fighter
zone.
Yep. So the fighter jets can reach them, because the fighter jets couldn't get it at 35,000 feet. That they made very clear. The fighter jets weren't able to get it.
If they were fully loaded with missiles, they do have a max altitude. So
I don't know.
Anyway,
I don't know about a Ukrainian jet. I know that specifically that jet was the MH17 was lowered to 33,000 feet, which was in range of the Ukrainian jets.
That's what I wanted to make sure. Right. I want to make sure that get across to the audience that we are over an active war zone, that civilian aircraft should not even have been present, because generally those are no-fly zones. And not only is it an active war zone with fighter aircraft actually flying missions out. So there's constant fighters taken off at different locations because it's an active war zone, that someone that we suspect may have been U.S. officers tells the aircraft to come down in altitude over an active war zone. So, all right, keep going.
Okay, so I got the community. Okay, so one of the other things that really stood out was Malaysia Air, who actually owned the damn plane. They were denied access to the black box. So they kept on saying the nationalists had the black box. I don't believe that for a second, because I believe that if the Russian nationalists actually had the black box, they would have given it to Malaysia. But they didn't. So I can only presume at that point that it was the SBU Ukrainians that had the black box, or it was our CIA and the Nazis that had the black box, because they were actually fighting Malaysia Air for the black box. They weren't going to give it. They finally gave. Now, see, this just like chaps my ass. They give the box to Malaysia Air, who turns around and gives it to London to say, "Oh no, you analyze it."
It's like, how
So
many people do you want to get involved in it, you know?
right, right. Well, now MI6 is also on the ground there, which is a different list of names. But MI6 is there, and they,
Where?
so why wouldn't
Where?
MI6 in the
Where?
Donbass region?
Okay.
Those are the three names that I had given you, or at least
I want you to tell
the
the
two
audience.
MI6 guys.
Yeah. So there's two
Oh,
MI6.
duh. I'm sorry. That's right. I forgot we
We've
had
got an audience.
company.
You have company.
Oh, shit. Oh, God, I gotta spell
No,
it out. So, all right. So, yeah, I apologize, people. Read my mind, damn it. Um, so, so anyway, Malaysia ends up giving the black box to MI6, who is on the ground in the Donbass at the same time as all of this going on, because, of course, birds of a feather, they flock together. And Malaysia, why they decided, who knows who bought off who to get that black box to MI6. I really find that kind of like hinky, but that's just my own opinion, worth nothing. But shortly thereafter, Malaysia starts announcing that they believe that Russia was being set up. Well, that's all fine and dandy for you to be spouting off that Russia's being set up when you just pass the only evidence to the people who have every opportunity to erase it. So just saying. Um, so the missile that everybody was talking about, that missile, I don't know how much people have been involved with it, but there was this surface to air missile. Well, that whole surface to air missile was like the first round of BS that they tried to give us, and they tried to blame Russia. And Russia, right on cue, turned around and gave the serial numbers, because of course Russians aren't stupid. They gave the serial numbers of all the Buk missiles that were left behind in the Ukraine after the Soviet Union was disbanded, was broken apart. So Ukraine and the Nazis had plenty of their own Buk missiles. And that missile in particular that they were talking about actually was still in Ukraine under the control of the Ukrainian Nazis. They went so far with the propaganda that at the beginning of all of this, they put together this propaganda film that was very poorly edited, very poorly put together, that was talking about that showed the missile on the back of a truck, that showed um, it traveling through villages. And of course, Vasily's interviewing all the villagers who said, no, there was no missile that traveled here. And not only could the missile not travel through the village, the overpasses were too low. So the truck never would have been able to fit underneath any of these overpasses on the road. So that was point number one. Point number two is they were talking about how there were no Ukrainian troops in that area, because again, they're trying to set up the nationalists as doing this deed. And that was the only time in Ukrainian history that all of a sudden on the battle maps that Ukraine drew the line further back. So it looked like they were not in control, like anywhere near the area that the plane went
I,
down.
I'll tell you why those missiles couldn't have got there. On July 7th, just a week before, 3 bridges spanning motorways leading to Donetsk are destroyed, with both sides accusing the other for the action.
Right.
They couldn't get
So
there.
they couldn't get there with that missile. And, so their propaganda film, showing the missile on the road, there's overpasses that they couldn't fit under, and then there's bridges that were destroyed that they couldn't get over. So it never would have happened. Oh, and there was another thing, and I totally zoned it.
Well, how about the
So
guys in the, I was going to say, in the
no, so
tower?
they actually had a recording that was very poorly pieced together. They actually had a recording of a pilot that was talking about. It was supposed to be a nationalist. That they went so far as to, with the AI, piece together some bullshit recording that would have, put the onus onto the nationalists, when in fact, when they analyzed it, it came back that it was in fact pieced together. And then ironically, the pilots that were involved, the 2 pilots that took off out of that airfield, suicided themselves. Just saying.
Well, that's not hinky, is it?
No, perfectly normal. Perfectly
Yeah.
normal. Though they committed suicide. So it's really kind of strange because, and I'm going to let the colonel go because I know she's dying to talk about the 3 guys at the airfield. But what's really interesting is the timing that the 3 of us decided that MH17 was going to be talked about, because only yesterday Russia finally gave it up and said, we're not playing anymore. We're done, because they're still fighting, or they were up until yesterday at the International Court. Oh, and I'm sorry, one more thing to like put a dot on this I. Barack Obama and our wonderful Congress in December of 2014 happened to put together the Ukrainian Freedom Act, which paid out Ukraine $300,000.
Kind of sounds like a payoff, doesn't it?
I think it does. I'm
In my
not going to
opinion.
presume. Yeah,
My
well,
opinion.
I'm Switzerland. What do I know? Oh, I'm sorry. They're not really neutral anymore, are they? Okay. All right, Colonel, do you want to take it with our wonderful contingency that showed up that day?
Well,
Colonel Joseph
Whatever happened
Hickok,
to those guys?
the
okay,
Lieutenant
so
Colonel Michael Willis, and Major Patrick Self.
well, Patrick Self shows up most recently in the Secretary of State for the U.S. as he's accompanying U.S. Ambassador to Qatar, Timmy Davis, and Colonel Patrick Self, who at the time I believe was a major when all of that was going on, as
Correct.
a defense as a defense attaché. And I'm just going to tell you, I find it very interesting that he would be in Qatar, only from the perspective that Qatar seems to be very corrupt and a repository for a lot of the funding that goes via the CIA into the radical Islamic terror outfits that the CIA has set up. Just saying.
And
And
Gaza and
this,
Israel, right?
well, our experience in research in Operation Gladio is that State Department's defense attaches, which are military, are the handlers of people that work for the CIA. And I'll give you a couple of examples. During Otto Skorzny's stay in Madrid, Spain, a sequence of defense attaches that were attached to Spain at the time for like 20 years were his successive handlers. And in Major Gannis's book, the Skorzeny Papers, he actually names them one after another after another. He also went to the point of saying that each and every one of them had some particular, very interesting intelligence training in their past to basically, like, there was a school back in the day in Germany that the people that were participating in Operation Gladio on behalf of the U.S. military would go to this one particular school, and he actually names it. So then he names the different officers that were assigned into Spain. So I found it very interesting that this guy shows up now. And then when you look at Timmy Davis, who happens to be the actual ambassador, because, you know, that's a lesson learned out of all of this, is you actually have to look at the ambassadors. I found it interesting that Timmy, who's a prior Marine, was assigned to Guatemala.
Excuse me. I'm sorry. There's a Marine named Timmy.
Yeah. Okay. So he was assigned to Guatemala. Well, he's from Alabama. So just saying.
Oh, now I get it.
Off the rails.
Guatemala, which we cooed, Iraq, which we cooed, Australia, and Colombia, which we cooed. And he also got hung up. His name showed up in Hillary Clinton's email controversy. So he does have a very interesting background in order to be potentially involved in Operation Gladio. Now, one of the other guys was Colonel Joseph Hitchcock. Now, let me tell you what's most strange about Joseph Hitchcock is the three of us months ago looked him up, and he had multiple entries on the internet, pictures including in his mess dress with his wife, because he was the defense attaché to Russia. Now, keep in mind what I just told you about attachés, right? So Hitchcock was the defense attaché, weirdly enough, to Russia, which is very interesting considering they're now blaming Russia for doing something that they actually did. But now go look up, what's his first name? Joseph? Yeah, Hitchcock. Go look him up and see if you can find him anywhere, because we couldn't find him. I don't know why. So
now, I want to just tell everybody, I've been working on MH17 for over a year. He was there. He was on the internet.
A lot of the information has been scrubbed. And specifically a lot of the English, like the English version of documents, like a lot of things, well, the videos, what's his name? Vasily? All his videos were taken down off YouTube, weren't they?
Yes, he does have some videos up on the Rumble channels. So if anybody is interested, I do recommend.
Yeah, so we just find it very interesting that when we first started doing this, I mean, literally, so when we were talking earlier today, I'm like, I'm not imagining it. There was a staircase. He's down at the end of it with his wife, and she's in her, you know, like a long dress, because it's a formal affair when you wear your mess dress as an officer. And they're like, no, I remember seeing that too. And it was while he was assigned attaché in Russia.
Yeah, and we were even talking about what side do those ropes, I don't know what the name of it is.
Yeah, that's right.
What side they should be on, because, because it looked like it should be on the other side because it was covering up his jewelry. So all his ribbons, and that didn't
Yeah,
look
I was going to say, those are ribbons, honey. They're not jewelry.
Oh, I call them jewelry. They're just so nice.
Yeah, there you go.
Now, the other guy, Willis, now he was promoted to the Georgia Civil Air Patrol and is now a colonel. So
Yeah.
we all know about the
Yeah.
Civil Air Patrol.
They do seem to come up fairly regularly.
Right.
It just, every time we
So,
open these things,
what?
that it just seems like they have sticky tentacles that go everywhere,
Yeah.
you know?
And by that, and let me just tell everybody, in case everybody's wondering what we're talking about in the Civil Air Patrol. So when you go and start researching the JFK assassination, you find out that all of the people that were hanging out in New Orleans, the Ferraris and Clay and several of the other CIA affiliated people that were trying to dirty up Lee Harvey Oswald with his New Orleans gangster part of his background, Patsy story. They all happen to be affiliated in some way, to include Lee Harvey Oswald actually being a member of the Civil Air Patrol. And come to find out, there was a bunch of gay people affiliated with the New Orleans Civil Air Patrol that they were using the Civil Air Patrol to pick up young boys interested in learning how to fly and taking them to parties. So the Civil Air Patrol has raised its head a couple of different times in a couple of different digs that we've done, and not in a good way. So just throwing that out there. So of course we're all looking at each other when we found out the guy was a commander in the air in the Civil Air Patrol. We're like, oh my word. So anyway, what else we got, ladies?
Can you, for Donnie Vision asked, can you spell the name for Joseph's last name?
Hickok?
I sure can. Yep, it is Hickkox.
Hicko.
And let's see, and Timmy's last name. Did we get Timmy's last name?
Timmy.
Oh, that was you.
Marine.
That was Timmy from Alabama.
Timmy Davis. Davis.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
And he was the one that worked with Major Patrick Self, SELF, who is now a colonel.
And the Qatar defense attaché.
Now, just as if this doesn't have enough hair on it, I just want to mention briefly, there was one other interesting aircraft that just so happened to go down just prior to MH17, and that was MH370 that went down in March 8th of 2014. In that particular case, it was, from what I drawn off my brain, it was headed towards Asia, and what do you think the chances are that someone had actually had family member on both airplanes? Now, MH370, while it was in the middle of the Indian Ocean, disappeared without a trace. The transponder was turned off, and then it quickly dropped off of radar. Again, in the same year, in March 8th, let's see, it was going from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. But that's another story for another day. But definitely leaves a lot more information to dig into.
Dun, dun, dun. Cliffhanger.
Right.
So I
now
find it interesting.
I can't see anything that's going on.
You what?
I was just going to say, I can't see anything that's going on, because if my phone tries to multitask, it's going to throw up. So I'm going to leave it to you guys with Twatter and Rubble.
Okay, so Bridget, was there anything else in the notes that you wanted to cover?
Not really. I mean,
Okay. So I just happened to, while they were giving you all of that information, I wanted to go over a couple of things that I found very interesting. When you're looking at the Air Force and we're talking about the airspace over an active war zone, I just went and looked up the inventory of the Ukrainian Air Force, and there's an entire area where it's talking about the and I love the way they phrase things, the 2014 insurgency in the Donbass, which was actually not an insurgency at all, unless you're talking about the Nazi Operation Gladio activities being the insurgents into the Donbass region, attacking the people that actually physically lived there. But I wanted to read a couple of points here. During this conflict, the Ukrainians lost several planes and helicopters. And it says the U.S. Embassy in Kiev reported that Ukraine lost 19 planes and helicopters between 22 April and 22 July. What's the date of the shoot down? 7th July. So this illustrates just how active the airspace was during this time. And the downing of aircraft was occurring on a regular basis. So when you start to look at this, and you're understanding that you've got fighter aircraft going up on missions, and you've got missile launchers trying to knock down other missiles that are coming in, and you've got helicopters flying around. The fact that you would even clear a commercial aircraft to fly over, regardless of how high it's flying over an active war zone, is just flipping ridiculous, no matter how you look at it.
Oh, and that does remind me, actually, the propaganda du jour, before everything got sorted out, is they wanted to say that they were aiming for Putin's plane because it was a red, white, and blue plane as well, and they thought it was Putin's plane. So there was some shenanigans going on about that too, that they were really aiming for Putin's plane. And this was the quote insurgents that would have done that. No, and that was the missile that couldn't reach. What's that?
And that's the other point I want to make. There's only one side. You've got citizens in the Donbass region, and then you have the government of Ukraine sitting in Kiev. The military of Ukraine was under the control of Kiev, not the Donbass region. If anything, they may have had some local guard kind of capability, but they don't have a lot of military in two outer regions of the country. You know, they don't have the command and control. Whatever military entities that had been located there would not have been under the control of the local, what they're referring to as insurgents. They wouldn't have had access to that. Mayors don't have F-15s, Joe Biden keeps telling us. So the fact that they're describing this as an active war with people that, you know, it'd be like the state of Florida declaring war on the county of Polk, where I live. What we got an army guard unit here, and that's it. You know, they don't even have tanks. They don't have helicopters. They ain't got jack crap. So how exactly is this even a fair fight when the country of Ukraine basically declares war on these two regional areas? It just, the whole concept of it is ridiculous. And that's what I'm trying to point out to people, that there could be in any way a fair fight. They're basically just hammering the hell out of the people that lived in the Donbass region. That's kind of the moral of the story. When you go back and you actually the battle damage assessment and stuff, those people did not inflict any damage on the rest of the country. So it wasn't technically a war. Go ahead.
And they were absolutely, and when we talk about these people being Nazis, we don't mean like the mainstream media calls Donald Trump a Nazi because they don't like him, blah, blah, blah. In this particular case, and this was talking about the Maidan coup, it said one of the big three political parties behind the protests is an ultra-nationalist Svoboda, whose leader... Svoboda.
It's Svoboda.
Okay. Has called for the liberation of his country from the Muscovite Jewish mafia after this 2010 conviction of the Nazi death camp guard Demanjuk for supporting the role in the death of over 30,000 people. He went to Germany to declare him a hero for fighting for the truth. This is the guy that was leading this. He was literally,
right.
They had signs and they were screaming out. They were calling everybody either, where was it? Essentially racial slurs. They were calling them Jews. They were calling them communists. They were saying, yeah.
So just and this is probably a good place to land this, but just for those who may be joining us and have not heard any of the rest of our material, Otto Skorzeny shows up a lot in Operation Gladio because he just does. He had such a large role in training after the end of World War II. So he was hired by NATO and paid by NATO to be a trainer for Operation Gladio, managed out of NATO. So while he was still an SS officer working for General Galen, who worked for Hitler, Otto Skorzeny was trained and then became the trainer of all of Galen's werewolf units. The werewolf units were stay-behind units in all of the Axis territories. Bandera, the guy that we just talked about, that is the inspiration of all of the people that were in the coup in 2014, they owe their allegiance to Bandera. Well, Bandera was in World War II. He was trained personally by Otto Skorzeny, and him and a couple of other leaders, Ledbed and another guy, basically they were told by Hitler that he would, when they were able to successfully defeat Russia, the Soviet Union, that Ukraine would get their independence. And the three of them basically were in a competition to see how many people they could kill to please Hitler. Bandera was one of the most vicious, cruel, murdering fools during World War II. I mean, hideous, to get his Nazi bona fides so he could be the leader of Ukraine once Hitler won. Well, Hitler didn't win, and Bandera, there's a whole story about him, but he was definitely one of Otto Skorzeny pupils and was 100% a Nazi. And so both the Azov battalion and right sector, if you go to the court documents after the 2014 coup, they actually had a court that held several people accountable for murdering their fellow citizens. The primary group responsible, there's two Nazi elements there. One's the Azov battalion and the other one's right sector. Right sector had rented an entire hotel on the square there. And it was through their, according to these court documents, it was through that hotel that they were able to station snipers around the square, that on cue, they opened fire on the people below and started murdering them in the square. And that's what caused the supposed Rada meeting and demanding the resignation of their duly elected president, because the Mockingbird media, probably Sky News was there too, immediately said it was the government's forces that opened fire on their own citizens to squelch the riots, which is absolutely not true. They went back and did, and by the way, the next day they cut down all of the trees in the square, because that would have been able to show the trajectory of the bullets that they were firing and how they were coming down from the roof, and not from the police that was on the ground. And so everything about that was an Operation Gladio, because if you take that scenario, that's the exact same scenario that they used in Greece when they couped the Greek government. Same thing. Get everybody into a square, open fire, lots of women and children, kill them first because it's maximized trauma and propaganda. And they're all about propaganda. So you have a sequence of events in which the United States, NATO, all of the European, all of the intelligence communities stage a coup. Going forward, you have in the government insurgents into the Donbass region, murdering, raping, setting on fire, assassinating mayors. All of this culminates in July and the downing of MH17. You have U.S. Air Force officers on the ground. You have the disappearance and standing down of an alternative tracking station, deactivating it so that it's only stuck with one, so they know that it's going to get passed off to it. They tell it to lower over an active war zone. It gets shot down and everybody dies. And all of a sudden, it gives these people that not only planned the coup a completely different narrative to attack Russia with, because they're losing the narrative in the Donbass region because they're getting their ass kicked. They've already lost half of their aircraft 3 months later. So just as is happening today, where they're getting their ass kicked again, and it's Russia this, Russia that, Russia this, Russia that. Everything is setting up Russia, when in fact it's the same people doing the same thing, and dead bodies accruing in Ukraine, just like it was before.
Well, and again, it's the distraction, because you guys are in war going on, and this is actually a threefer, because you're conducting the Israeli war, you're setting up Russia to be the bad guys, and you are taking out leading researcher. This is where
you're banning.
I can say one foot stomp.
Cousin it.
You
Hold
take
on.
out
You're
the
banned.
leading. You take. Yeah. I can't help it.
Okay, well, we can't hear you, so talk a little slower and try
I
it
don't know
again.
how to fix it. You what?
Okay. You talk slower and go again. It's a threefer.
You're doing
It's
better.
a threefer.
You're doing better.
You're distracting. You're distracting from Israel. You're blaming Russia, and you're taking out the AIDS researcher that would have exposed Fauci and the DOD.
Perfect.
So it's not just about that plane. It's about
Correct.
who was on that plane and when it happened.
Correct.
And for those of you
Absolutely.
that don't know, Bandera met his end with cyanide bullet in Munich, and that was courtesy of Russia, so we can thank them for that. But his protege, Vyacheslav Stetsko, sorry, Froggy, he was greeted with banners and balloons at the Reagan White House. So
Wow.
So
they don't go far.
say that. Yeah, because you were banding a little bit again. So basically what she was saying is Bandera gets taken out, and Stetsko, who was one of his proteges, relocates, and he's bad too, really bad. He relocates and gets citizenship in the United States and is put up in a city in New Jersey that basically became a haven for these Nazis that were relocated into the United States, and was, on the Chamber of Commerce for Ukraine. He was very active, including being invited to the White House and meeting with Reagan. So all very important information that we've dug up as part of this full research.
I like to bring it up because it makes Froggy cry.
Well, we're all about making people. Bridget, did you have anything?
He gets so upset to find out Reagan was a bad guy.
Nope, I think that's
Bridget,
it. That covers it for now.
Okay.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Thank you for being here.
We try. Sometimes it might be just by the hair of our teeth, but we try.
Yeah. All right.
And,
so
I'm just here for the booze.
You guys on Rumble, hit the thumbs up. And everybody on Twitter, give us a follow. Give especially Eternal Towner. We are being actively suppressed. We are being smashed down. You're going to have to set your notifications. And
right.
We'll see you next
Don't
time.
follow me. Don't follow me. I'm antisocial. I'm going to put it out there. Nobody follow me. I'm antisocial.
Yep.
No, I wouldn't say you're antisocial. You're just a little grouchy every once in a while.
She's a mean one.
No,
but, we're all
she's
different.
Actually really nice.
No, you had to bring the puppy up.
Oh, yeah. There's the boy.
Adorable.
There's the boy.
Say hi
so,
to everybody.
No, actually, the technical term is I'm the bitch. So.
Okay. All right.
But I did call out Botox. I did.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll go with that. Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to sign off here because I'm getting told it's time to go to bed.
Yeah.
And he's definitely going to want his nightcap. So
right.
He's getting the boost tonight.
There you go.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for being here.
Yep. Thank you.
We'll see you tomorrow at noon.
Deal.
All right. See you guys later.
Okay.